In September 1913, the leader of a Canadian Arctic expedition stepped off his trapped ship to hunt for meat. He expected to be gone about 10 days. When he came back, the ship was gone. On board were dozens of people, drifting west on moving ice, under a captain whose later story would make him a hero, and whose own records would become part of the problem. Robert Bartlett came home with the story everyone wanted, a captain crossing ice in Siberian tundra to bring rescue back to Wrangel Island. The journey is real, but Bartlett is not only a hero here, he is also a witness. And the first hard problem in his witness account is the hunting trip that left the Karluk without the man officially leading her. The Canadian Arctic expedition did not sail as a private stunt. Ottawa put money, departments, and national ambition behind Vilhjalmur Stefansson's expedition. Contemporary government documents confirm that the Department of Naval Service had general direction, that multiple departments cooperated on its dispatch, and that the mission carried a scientific mandate into the Western Arctic. It also carried a claim about Canada itself, that the country could assert presence in the high north as a matter of policy, not simply adventure. When the ship failed, the government's relationship to the consequences was never fully reckoned. Bartlett had the credentials the expedition needed. He had been north before, had sailed with Peary, and understood what ice demanded of a wooden hull. The record gives him, in smaller scale too, a master keeping positions, weather, and anxiety in a journal. Noting fathoms and temperatures with the precision of someone who understood that precision was the only thing standing between the possible and the catastrophic. He also carried, according to his 1916 published account, a battered copy of Omar Khayyam's Rubaiyat. The same volume, the same company, voyage after voyage. That detail matters here, not because it softens the questions this record raises, but because it anchors him as a person before the ice makes him a symbol. The question is not whether Bartlett was brave. The question is what his record can bear. Bartlett's 1916 published account, written 2 years after the sinking and set down with Ralph Hale, gives texture and detail that no other source preserves. His journal and later archival reassessments show that not every Bartlett version should be treated as untouched record. The surviving English-language record names the Inuit and Inupiat people aboard, mostly when their skill became useful to the expedition. That is a warning label on the archive, not a reason to erase them from the account. Mugpi, a small girl from Point Barrow, was aboard with her family. She would survive to become the youngest known survivor of the disaster. Kataktovik would later cross the ice with Bartlett across hundreds of miles of terrain that no map could prepare a man to navigate. The record gives them less voice than it gives the white officers, and this account names that plainly. The sources here are one-sided, and that limitation is not a footnote. It is a structural condition of everything that follows. The Karluk was not a Fram. She was an old working vessel, a former sealing ship being asked to play the role of a polar drift ship. Bartlett's own memoir acknowledges she had neither the ice pressure strength nor the engine power required for serious loose ice work. Janice Cavell's archival reassessment goes further. The ship was utterly unfit for a drift expedition. The more difficult point is that this unfitness was not hidden from the planners. It was knowable, and the choice was made anyway. A cautious reading of the planning record suggests the danger was not ignorance. It was the hope, shared between the men with the most authority and the most ambition, that ice would serve the expedition before it destroyed the vessel carrying it. Stefansson's later Arctic philosophy made hardship sound almost administrative. Know the country, live from it, keep moving. The argument was that a prepared man did not need the same supply chain as a conventionally organized expedition. It was a position that made risk look like method and privation look like proof of competence. But the Karluk problem was not whether a skilled Arctic traveler could live off the land. It was whether a mixed ships company had been told, honestly and specifically, what kind of risk it had actually joined. Several of the people aboard had signed on for something that looked considerably different from what the autumn of 1913 was about to ask of them. By mid-August 1913, the itinerary had already stopped being an itinerary. The paper trail places the Karluk's departure on 17 in June and her freezing fast by 13 of August. A trapped ship is not still. It only looks still from the deck. Beneath the hull, the ice field is always moving, always under pressure, carrying everything on its surface in directions that do not consult the plans of the people standing on it. The ship was being taken somewhere. No one aboard had chosen the destination. On 20th September 1913, Stefansson left the ship on what the official version framed as a hunting trip for fresh meat. Heritage NL's account records that he departed with 5 other men, dogs, and sledges, prepared for approximately 10 days ashore. The word abandonment is tempting here, and it has been applied often. The record is not clean enough for that word to stand alone. What the record shows is a separation. The official expedition leader left a trapped ship and did not return. What the record does not say with any confidence is what Stefansson understood about the ship's condition at the moment of departure, or what he calculated the ice would do in his absence. The gap between those two things is exactly where the argument about blame has lived for more than a century. The hunting party expected to find the ship where they had left her. The ice had other timing. Within 2 days of Stefansson's departure, strong winds moved the Karluk rapidly to the west. The official Department of Naval Service report records that many conflicting reports followed the separation and that the Russian government was asked to maintain a lookout for the vessel. The ship had not yet sunk. It had simply become unreachable, which is its own kind of disappearance. Within days, the Karluk was not a camp to return to. She was a moving absence. On 28 September, Bartlett's journal is not heroic. It is practical, anxious, almost dry. The Bodo and Perry Macmillan Arctic Museum's transcription records that on that date, Bartlett considered leaving the ship to be very probable. He was noting positions and temperatures, watching depth readings, preparing for the possibility that the hull itself might have to be abandoned. The journal is a contemporary document, set down in the moment, and it carries a register that his later memoir does not always match. Where the memoir looks back with the knowledge of survival, the journal does not yet know the ending. That difference matters when the two documents disagree, and in several places they do. Up to this point, the record can still pretend the problem is temporary. A hunting party ashore, a ship in ice, a plan delayed. After the September separation, the case enters its gap. The official leader is on land. The ship is moving west. No one on either side controls the distance opening between them. What happens next belongs partly to reconstruction and partly to the honest acknowledgement that the chain of command the expedition had relied on was broken and was not going to be repaired. In January, the pressure stopped being future tense. The records show that sea ice opened the Karluk's hull on 10th of January 1914. The ship sank on 11 January. Bartlett had prepared for this. Supplies had been moved onto the ice, and the contingency plan had been rehearsed to the extent a plan on moving sea ice can ever be rehearsed. But preparation is not rescue. It only changes the shape of the survival problem. The ship was gone. What remained was a company of people on Arctic sea ice with a finite supply of food and fuel and no certainty that rescue would come before those ran out. Shipwreck camp sounds almost stable if you read only the nouns. Igloos, mattresses, stove, books, rations. Bartlett's account describes a disciplined operation, supplies organized, structures built against the wind, the catastrophe arranged into manageable units. Then the thermometer enters the sentence, and the comfort becomes what it was. The Bodoan transcription preserves a 26 January journal entry, fine and clear, the thermometer at -24, with Bartlett describing the situation as very comfortable. The word comfortable at -24, on sea ice, with a sunken ship below you and Wrangel Island still weeks away, is one of the most compressed sentences in the record. It is the language of a man who has decided that professionalism is the only available response, and who may have already decided that his journal was also writing for an audience. Then come the people who do not come back. Heritage NL's account records that 4 men left the camp independently and were never heard from again. Another party reached Wrangel Island and remains were found later. Cavell's reassessment preserves the hardest absence in the archive. There are no surviving records from the 8 men in the 2 lost parties. No journal, no note, no account at all. Whatever those men understood, decided, or endured in their final days belongs entirely to the unknown. The dead in this case disappear twice, first into the ice and then into the versions other men built of what happened to them. The march to Wrangel Island was not one clean crossing. It was a series of broken decisions over broken ice. What survives places 17 people on Wrangel Island by 12th of March, covering roughly 100 miles from the site of the sinking. Bartlett planned depots and divided the groups into parties that could move at different speeds. Bartlett belongs at the center of the crossing, but he does not belong there alone. The surviving record makes him the plan, the method, and the will behind the march. But that version is also shaped by what the archive chooses to preserve, and by what it leaves almost voiceless. Only now does the famous part begin. Bartlett and Kataktovik left Wrangel Island 6 days after the main group arrived. The most likely sequence, based on Bartlett's memoir and Heritage NL's synthesis, is that Bartlett had considered moving the whole company, but left the others behind because several were too weakened by the march to survive the pace the rescue journey required. He did not leave Wrangel because the story needed a hero. He left because the island could not become a second winter camp, and because someone had to cover 700 miles to the Siberian coast and then continue to a place where a telegraph wire existed. Reaching the world again did not close the case. It opened another clock. The surviving account places Bartlett on the Siberian coast, then at St. Michael, then at a telegraph wire to Ottawa. His memoir describes what followed as weeks of delay, coal shortages, fog, the slow assembly of the rescue effort, and the anxiety of waiting aboard the Bear for ice conditions that might not open in time. Bartlett could send word. He could argue for ships. He could not command the ice around Wrangel Island. The record does not tell us how many of the survivors still waiting there understood, as the weeks passed, whether the man who had left was bringing help back or had simply become another absence. Several retellings flattened the September event into one word: abandonment. Stefansson's defenders have flattened it the other way. Accident, bad luck, an expedition leader caught ashore by conditions no one could predict. The record supports a harder sentence than either slogan. Heritage NL's account says Stefansson left on a hunting expedition he expected to last 10 days, and then could not find the vessel when he returned to the coast. Cavell's 2017 reassessment, working through both men's accounts against the archival evidence, concludes that neither gave an entirely accurate version. Stefansson misrepresented aspects of the separation and the planning that preceded it. Bartlett also bore responsibility for the condition of the ship, for the risk that had been accepted, and for the degree to which the people aboard had not been given the full picture of what they had joined. Stefansson's 1921 self-account, written 7 years after the Karluk sank, is useful for how he wanted the separation understood, not as neutral proof of intent. It belongs to the same family of sources as Bartlett's memoir, illuminating about tone and emphasis, requiring attribution when any specific claim is drawn from it. One widely repeated line says an Admiralty Commission later censured Bartlett for his conduct. Some institutional summaries treat this as settled. That claim should remain disputed unless the Commission record itself is produced and examined. What Cavell's work finds is narrower and more useful. Bartlett made an official report, rewrote parts of his own journal before it entered the naval record, and the paper trail historians have since examined is less clean than the legend requires. A damaged record is still a record. It simply tells you something different from what it appears to at first reading. The cleanest version of this story is also the least honest one. The version where Stefansson is the villain and Bartlett is the hero is satisfying and wrong in the same proportion. Stefansson did not simply vanish into villainy. Bartlett did not simply stand outside blame. Cavell's reassessments, taken together, point toward a shared responsibility distributed unequally. Two men drawn by the same ambition toward an undertaking the ship was not built to survive, planned in ways the people aboard had not all been given a full vote in. The ones who died in the crossing and the 4 who left camp and were never found carry the weight of decisions made before they ever stepped onto the Karluk's deck. The record also has an ethical limit that no verdict can honestly ignore. The people who helped keep the survivors alive, the Siberian residents who gave Bartlett and Kataktovik food, rest, and mended equipment during their overland crossing, are preserved mostly through other men's sentences. Heritage NL notes their help. The record does not give them the same depth it gives the officers. That does not make their contribution secondary to the outcome. It makes the archive poorer than the survival story deserves. The famous journey to Siberia is real, and it deserves its place. The records show that the King and Wings reached Wrangel Island on 7th September 1914, and that Bartlett was reunited with the survivors he had left behind. 8 men did not come back. Their names are in the archive even when their accounts are not. But the rescue is not the whole verdict, and the survival story is not the whole case. The Karluk was not only a story of a captain who went for help. It was a story of a leader who left for meat, a captain who kept a damaged record, and a government that never forced the clean verdict the dead deserved.